Hello and welcome to my shop. It's gotten a facelift. Doesn't it look so much nicer? I'm very psyched about all this. I didn't even paint that. That's just mold and moisture resistant coating on drywall, sheetrock. So very excited about this. So I have had a video idea in mind for a while. I am going to be doing some resin pouring for a very specific project. But it's going to be fairly small, and I have experience doing resin pouring before with scale model making and stuff like that. So I thought I would take an opportunity to do a video that I don't think I've seen anyone do in regards to woodworking, and that is how to make a reusable silicone mold for doing resin pouring. I'm pretty sure this will only work up to a certain size. You can't do a tabletop with this, but if you want to do resin pours for like serving boards, this is a great way to be able to do it, and you won't have to constantly rebuild the hard mold and tear it all apart again. Because usually you just have to throw that away, and this you can reuse a bunch of times until the silicone finally wears out. Anyway, let's get on to it. Okay, so this isn't really a complicated process, but I thought I'd touch on some of the finer points because I have a little bit of experience with this. The first thing you need to do is make a blank. This can basically be any shape. I need this specific 3 foot by ½ inch thick by 4 inches wide for the project's going to be doing. So I just got a piece of plywood. It's actually 3 pieces I stuck together because I didn't have one single sheet I could cut this out of, so I just made this out of the scraps. But this can be any shape that you want it to be. It can be wider, it can be thicker, up to a certain amount. If you want to do fancy shaped cutting boards like this, if I could remember to put a picture there, you can cut that shape out and use that. Super easy to do. So make your blank. Then you need to make the mold for your blank. And I'm not going to make you watch me do this step by step because this is really simple. This one I made out of plywood. You could probably even get away with like that foam core board for science fair projects in Walmart, which would be cheaper than this. I had some plywood kicking around, so I just made it out of this. And really, you just hot glue it all together. I'm not going to walk you through step by step on how to hot glue things. If you are watching this video and you don't know how to use a hot glue gun, I'm sure you can figure it out. It's not all that difficult. Just be careful because it does get very, very hot. The trick is figuring out how big to make this. You want it big enough so that the walls of your mold will be solid, but not so big that it's going to take like 3 gallons of silicone to fill up the void space. So it's kind of a balancing act. And you can make a rigid mold to go around the silicone mold when you want to do the resin pours, just to give the sides some extra strength. I made this one a total of about 4 inches longer, like 2 inches on each end. It's 2 inches deep, and this is only ½ an inch deep, so that's plenty deep enough. And it's, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches on each side of the mold. So that should do all right. And it doesn't have to be super deep either. The more silicone you use, the more robust the mold will be. But you also don't want to spend money on silicone that you don't need. Silicone is the element. Big trick with the molds too is make sure you do a nice bead of hot glue all the way around the joints. If you want to be extra sure, you can water test this first. Just literally just pour water in it and see if any of your joints leak. They don't, let it dry out completely and then go ahead and use it. I've seen people doing like the tabletop pours where they build a wooden frame, put the wood in and just pour, and then it leaks. I don't know why they don't water test those. Like, I feel like it's worth a day or two to fill it with water, see if it leaks, patch all the leaks first, and then pour thousands of dollars worth of resin into the mold, knowing it won't leak. That seems, I don't know, pretty self-evident to me. Anyway, next step is for this kind of mold that we're making here, you just hot glue the blank into the bottom of your mold. So let's do that. Okay, and again, I am not going to make you watch me do this step by step. That would be kind of silly. It just needs to be secure. It doesn't have to be watertight along this edge. It helps a little bit, but the worst that's going to happen is you'll get a little bit of seep underneath the edge, and you can just trim that off with a sharp knife. And that's really all that is to that part. I'm trying to think if there was something else I was going to mention, but I don't think so. Now, just most silicone comes in two parts. I think it all comes in two parts. Very often, it's a 1-to-1 mix. But as far as this part goes, just follow the mixing and curing directions of the silicone, and you'll be fine. All right, and I think we're going to come back when this is all cured, and I can show the demolding. All right, one thing I forgot to mention, it's a good idea to wear gloves when you're doing this kind of stuff. Silicone's not too bad, even the resin's not the worst, but you know, it just makes cleanup a whole lot easier. So there we are, all poured. You want to keep this mostly level. It doesn't have to be perfectly level, which I think I might lift this end up a little bit, prop it up, shim it up a little bit. What's really important is when you go, this will help actually, when you go to cast the resin in this, then you need to make sure your mold is level. It's not as important here, but it'll be helpful. So I'm going to shim this up, and I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, good morning. This is the next day for me, even though it's just going to be a simple jump cut for you. The demolding time on this particular brand of silicone was listed at 3 to 5 hours, but I poured it kind of late. So I just let it sit overnight, and now we're going to demold it and see how it comes out. I've got a nice little dead blow mallet here to help me with this. One thing I forgot to mention yesterday, silicone doesn't stick to much of anything except other silicone. So I don't anticipate any problems demolding this. If you want, you can always use a demolding agent, or honestly, just put a film of paste wax on it, and that will be more than enough to make sure that your mold comes off really easily. So let me bring you over to the bench here. I don't anticipate any problems demolding. Oh, there we go. Turns out, in this case, steady pressure is better than whacking it with a hammer. You know what? I'm going to throw a set of gloves on because this stuff is likely to splinter up a little bit, and I don't feel like getting any splinters in my hands this morning. So let's go with slow and steady instead of mallet. Oh, you know what? That's coming apart with no problem. Okay. So I overthought that. I was thinking I should use the dead blow mallet and make sure it comes apart, but it turns out the fact that it's bouncy rubber actually made it harder. Yeah, see, once you get it, that initial break, it's just peeling right off. And this piece over here, I think I actually just kind of cracked that with a hammer and made things harder for myself. There we go. We're learning together. All right. Now this part is going to be a little more tricky because we've got the mold, the blank in there. Yep, it's coming free. You can't see it there. Might be able to hear that. Here, let's bring it over here where you can kind of see what I'm doing. So the blank is kind of staying behind inside there, but that's not a problem. That'll peel free. There we go. And you can see here, as I mentioned, there was a little seepage over. You can just take a sharp knife and trim that right off, which I'm actually going to do before I even take the blank out. That is all going to go in garbage. You know, my bench is kind of a mess right this second. And it doesn't take much pressure. You just want to make sure you have a nice sharp blade, and will come right off. In fact, a lot of it I can just peel off. I know this is an exciting television. You can actually see on there where the bottom layer of the plywood tore off and stayed behind with the hot glue. Yeah, some of this will just peel right off. But over here is a little bit thicker. You can't see because my shoulder's in the way. I do not have the sharpest of blades here. But what are you going to do, right? Swap the blade over. Let me just take a second and do that. There we go. Now we've got a nice sharp blade. Just trim that excess right off. And this excess really doesn't matter a whole lot anyway. Because this side of the mold is kind of irrelevant. It's the lower part that matters. So if you have a little excess material on here, it's not a big deal. All right, let's get the blank out. A little twist. As you can see, it pulls right free. As I said, silicone doesn't stick to much except silicone. That's what makes it such a great molding material. All right. And there we have some of that glare out of the way. There we have a casting mold. As you can see, it's pretty soft, so you may actually want to make a solid base for it. If it's thin-walled or bigger than this, you could always build a frame to put it in, like a solid frame, so the edges don't flex out. This is so thin. I mean, the molding piece is so thin and the silicone's so thick that I'm not going to have any issues with that. Anyway, that's how you go about making a mold. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some live edge pieces, put them in here and up along here, pour a little resin in it, and make my resin board for what I need to do. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm not going to do the pouring and the cutting right now because I have to get ready for my actual job, but maybe I'll show you that in a video too. All right, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.